And I'd like to start by really recognising and endorsing the MacKillop approach. That MacKillop really, I think, has been the leader in the field in terms of developing heritage services, and I think it's to the credit of the organisation and Michaela and others that that's been the case. So I really wanted to acknowledge that. The brief I was given today was to talk about managing complaints and claims of past abuse and considerations for CEOs and boards. So I'm not going to talk about the Royal Commission, and I'm not going to talk about recent abuse or present abuse, current abuse. Rather going to direct my comments to how organisations might respond when there have been allegations of past abuse. Up arrow?
Oh, sorry, to the side. This side arrows.
Side arrow? Yeah. So, wanted to say at the outset that I think we're. I also need to make a clarification on my position. It was mentioned in the intro that I'm a former CEO, and that's exactly right, and I'm really enjoying being a former CEO. But I need to make it clear that I don't represent the views of any organisation, and that includes the Centre for Excellence and former board member of the Centre too. So speaking purely as myself today. We're in a changed environment, and the environment's changing. And I think we have to acknowledge that and kind of look at where some of the trends might be heading. Claims and complaints have been around for a long time. They're not new. The way they've been dealt with, the way that they've been addressed now is different. And previously, many complaints and claims were addressed in secret or at least in confidence. What's happened recently, and by recently I mean over the past 10, 15 years or so, is that there's been a much more open sort of process and a much more public awareness of processes around past abuse. And that's come from a number of areas. Jennifer Coate this morning mentioned 40 inquiries. I wasn't aware of that number, but it's a huge number. The Senate inquiry and the first Forgotten Australians report was in 2004. There was the National Apology in 2008, the State inquiry that's proceeding now, and then the Royal Commission that's coming up. What I think that means for community service organisations is that there are some implications that we need to be very aware of, and we need to know it as staff members, as managers, and as board members of organisations. The change in the community understanding is now accepting that abuse was common and frequent in church-based institutions, and probably in secular institutions. There hasn't been a lot of attention paid to the non-church-based institutions to date, but it's going to come without doubt, because abuse happened across the board. There hasn't been a generally accepted explanation as to why that was the case. How do we make sense of why children in our care, and I think as Peter Johnston pointed out, it's our mission, vision, purpose to look after children. How then did we allow them to be abused, and why did it happen? Hopefully the inquiries will start to provide some of the answers to that. And then finally, I think CSOs and faith-based organisations will be judged not only on their histories of abuse, but on the way abuse has been and is being responded to, and the way compensation claims are managed. So I think it's absolutely important that all organisations pay some very immediate attention to what their attitude and their response is going to be. The next couple of slides are very busy, and I do have handouts of them if anyone wants, maybe Marilyn, if it might make it a little easier to read. But what I thought I'd do would be to look at some of the principles and practice issues, and then consider some of the dilemmas involved with those. Now, having listened to Peter before lunch, and I would endorse absolutely everything that Peter says in terms of governance responsibilities, these ought not to be dilemmas. There ought to be very clear answers to how organisations respond. Ethical answers that I think are most important. However, and basing it on the experience of the organisation they used to be with, there will be dilemmas presented that may come as a surprise, may catch us off guard if we're not prepared for them. So what I wanted to do was to try to anticipate what some of those dilemmas might be. First principle, congruence with vision, purpose and values. In other words, the way that we treat allegations or complaints or legal claims ought to be absolutely congruent with our vision, our purpose and our values. And I think Peter Johnson said that very clearly before lunch. The associated dilemma, do we treat potential and actual claimants in a way that's consistent with our vision, purpose and values, or do we regard them as a threat to the organisation achieving these? It's a dilemma that often boards who perhaps may not come with the understanding of people who've been trained in the field may struggle to come to terms with. And so I think it's worth being able to prepare boards to address some of these questions, and that's the reason I want to put them up as dilemmas. Second principle and practice issues, acceptance of the divergence of experience of care leaders and the need to validate each unique experience. A lot of people were abused. A lot of other people will say, I wasn't abused and my experience was good. I really valued what experience I had. I think what we've got to do as an organisation is be prepared to accept without question, without qualification, the divergence of views, that there are a variety of views and experiences. And we shouldn't be trying to validate one at the risk of invalidating another. Can we validate each different account of experiences in institutions, or do we promote a view of the institution that may invalidate some stories? How can we meet our obligations to care leaders when they might be involved in an adversarial process with the organisation? One of the dilemmas I think we have is that we want to provide a supportive service to people, but at times that'll involve us working with people who have a legal claim. I think it's very important as an organisation that we don't set up an adversarial purpose there. That we say, despite whatever legal claim you might have, you're welcome. This is a part of your experience and you're welcome to come and be with us, to come to reunions and things like that. Don't have to feel that because there's an adversarial process underway that invalidates your rights there. The state government view is that providing funding for support and counselling services and facilitating legal settlements is preferable to establishing a redress scheme. And that's been in the past, in the past the Labor government held that view and the current Liberal government holds that view too in the state. So it may not change, who knows. There are some implications for community service organisations. Because often the CSO may be named jointly with the state as a defendant in a claim. What the state will generally try to do under those circumstances is to manage the process, and that's usually quite okay. But what it means for the CSO is that there might be a loss of autonomy in that process. Pardon me. And I think community service organisations generally are sympathetic to the view that redress is preferable. I noticed when Peter was responding to this before lunch, I'll go along with what he said. What I think we need to be guided by is what care leaders want. And care leaders are saying very strongly that redress is important. So I think that needs to be the guiding principle there. Acceptance of responsibility for the actions of predecessor organisations. Do we try and distance ourselves from another organisation, a predecessor? Or do we accept that as the current legal entity, that we have the same legal responsibility? And I think very clearly we do. One of the things that boards perhaps will be very interested in, and financial people, is are we insured? Prior to about 1987, there wasn't a state-managed insurance scheme that we have at the moment. So many organisations prior to 1987 may not be insured. It's worth checking. If you are insured, what may happen in the process of a claim coming about is that the insurance company may seek to take over the running of the claim. Well, what does that mean for the organisation? Are they going to approach it in a very adversarial sort of way? Even if the organisation doesn't want to. And if you don't want to go along with that, what does that mean for your insurance cover?